Some stories crawl out of the grave. Others are buried beneath ice and silence. From the bone-dry heart of the Australian outback to the snow-blind trails of Siberia, terror doesn't knock, it waits. Here, we tell the tales that stay with you long after the fire's gone out. Zombies, vanished hikers, unsolved deaths, end-of-the-world whispers that echo through time. This is Aussie After Dark, the place where the line between fact and fear disappears. So light a candle, lock the doors, and don't blink, because the story you're about to hear might just be true. They were the kind of mornings that felt carved from memory, the kind I will remember always, even when the world is a charred dream. I woke to the sun slanting through our bedroom window, painting steam on the windowsill and spilling light across the hardwood floor. Beside me lay Elise, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, little breaths of warmth that felt like home. I could hear the faint rumble of traffic not far off, the afternoon birds already calling. Australia in spring, sweet gum sap on the breeze, jacarandas blooming along the street, bees humming as they wove through wisteria-draped fences. Our home in Newcastle was modest, a brick bungalow with a wraparound front porch and a lemon tree near the back gate. Inside, it smelled of coffee brewing and toast browning. I slid out of bed, careful not to wake Elise, and padded across the rug. The floorboards creaked under my feet. Even in the quiet, the house felt alive. Knickknacks on the bookshelf, framed photos of the kids on the mantel, a single pair of rain boots by the back door, Elise's splattered with last month's pottery clay. I lingered in the kitchen doorway, watching the steam curl from the kettle. On the counter by the window sat a plate of buttered muffins that Elise had baked the night before. Their tops were cracked just enough to show the sweet jam filling. In the living room, Chloe lay on the couch, head propped on a pillow, coloring in her sketchbook. At 12, she was tall for her age, with long brown hair in a messy braid and freckles across her nose. She hummed a tune I recognized, her mother's old lullaby, while sketching a winged creature that looked half bird, half canine, wings unfurled like sails. From the back corridor, I could hear the soft patter of small feet. Noah emerged, 6 years old, curly hair tousled like a dandelion gone to seed, clutching Mr. Teddington, his stuffed turtle. "Mornin', Dad," he said, voice soft, still cracking from sleep. "Mornin', mate," I rumbled, crouching to ruffle his hair. He pressed his stuffed friend against me, and I smelled the faint tang of zoo trips and playground dust. The routine was simple: breakfast, school run, work. At 7:15, I poured steaming coffee into a chipped mug and placed it on the kitchen table. I put out 4 plates with buttered muffins and scrambled eggs. The soft metallic tap of cutlery clicking against china echoed in the morning stillness. Chloe joined me on the bench, tucking her coloring book behind her back. Noah climbed into his booster seat, drumming his spoon against the plate. Elise entered, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes alight with that calm determination I'd known since our university days. Her green eyes found mine, and she offered the gentle smile that could melt any worry. "I've got parent-teacher meetings today," she said, pouring a cup of tea. "Your turn for drop-off?" I nodded. "No problem." Together, we sat in companionable silence, watching our children eat and listening to the distant hum of life beyond our picket fence. It was mundane, it was precious, and as I would learn, it was the last time everything would feel so ordinary. I kissed Elise goodbye and headed out with Chloe and Noah, the morning sun gilding the tops of rooftops and the jacarandas nodding like purple flames. The drive to school was unremarkable. Typical midday traffic, a few Beatles slapped against the windshield, the radio playing a soft rock ballad. I dropped Noah at the kindergarten gate and Chloe at the high school entrance. She waved, book bag slung over her shoulder, her sketchbook poking out of the side pocket. I winked at her, and she grinned back before disappearing into the maze of backpacked students. I'd stayed behind 1 minute too long, watching the trailing tendrils of morning mist lift off the fields as I pulled away. That was when I heard the first warning. The radio had switched to a crackling emergency broadcast. A voice, calm but urgent, announced, "Attention all citizens. We are experiencing unusual clusters of pneumonia-like respiratory illnesses in multiple states. If you experience high fever, persistent cough, or shortness of breath, please seek medical attention immediately. Avoid public gatherings and maintain good hygiene. Further instructions to follow." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Pneumonia in multiple states? Already? My mind raced back to last winter when a wary headline about mysterious viral strains flickered across my phone screen. But that was months ago. An easy thing to forget when every day is full of bills, soccer practice, chores. I turned the volume up. The broadcast continued, warning of hospital overcrowding and urging calm. A man chimed in with a voice that trembled. "My sister, she's in Newcastle Hospital. Doctors are saying fluid in lungs. They can't keep up." A woman's voice fought through tears. "We can't find any masks or sanitizer. Lines are hours long." I stepped on the brake and pulled into the school car park. The crisp morning air felt suddenly cooler, as though the world was holding its breath. Parents and children milled around, glancing at their phones. Some faces were pale with concern. Others whispered in clusters. In that instant, I realized everything was about to change, but I still thought we had time. Enough time to adapt, to prepare. That evening at home, dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Elise had prepared a simple meal: roasted sweet potatoes, green beans, and grilled chicken. Chloe sat at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with her finger, while Noah dropped peas on the floor and hummed that same lullaby. I poured wine into Elise's glass and a juice carton for the kids. My own glass stayed mostly full as I tried to keep my attention on them rather than on the speech looping on my phone's screen. Hospitals were overwhelmed, the newscaster said with grim satisfaction. The virus, dubbed Epsilon by scientists, was highly contagious, spread by droplets and possibly through surface contact. Early data suggested it incubated for up to 7 days, and some patients who seemed mild suddenly collapsed into respiratory failure. "Nothing we'd seen before," they insisted. Elise's expression hardened. She turned off the TV. "Enough," she said. She drew Chloe's hair behind her ear and looked at me. "We shouldn't let the kids see this all the time. It'll scare them." I nodded, but I felt that tremor inside me, the same tremor I heard in the first broadcast. I excused myself, claiming more work, but I sank into my study and began compiling a list: cans of food, bottled water, batteries, medical supplies. We had a modest stock: frozen meals, some tins, a first aid kit, but nothing beyond that. Later that night, a knock came at the door. I recognized our neighbor, old Mr. Walsh, leaning on his cane, face gray. He looked past me at the clipped lawn, the tidy roses, The potted herbs by the gate? I offered him a seat, but he said, "Can't sleep. Too many sirens. Hospitals are turning people away." He closed his eyes and drew a shuddering breath. There's talk they're moving bodies in cart after cart, and they don't have time to test half of them, saying it's Epsilon, just bury 'em quick. Stop spreading it. I shut the door gently, heart pounding. That night, I watched Elise tuck Chloe into bed, brushing the child's hair back, using the lullaby to soothe her. Noah dozed off in his bunk, Mr. Teddington tucked under his arm. I lay there wide-eyed, wondering which one of us might succumb first. At midnight, I rose quietly dressed in jeans and a t-shirt and crept outside. The street lamp cast pale halos on the pavement. Noisy birds of night, kookaburras, laughed in the darkness. Down the street, I heard distant sirens. I walked to our fence, peering into the neighbor's yard. The world looked unchanged, but I knew better. Seeds of panic were sprouting. This was no longer a cold or seasonal flu. It was something that would test the very bones of humanity. The next morning dawned cold and gray, as though the sun itself was hibernating. I brewed coffee and checked our list. We had 2 weeks of canned beans, 4 loaves of bread in the freezer, rice, pasta, and some protein bars. Elise had stocked up on flour and sugar, but no masks, no hand sanitizer. We filled bottles with tap water and boiled them, then let them cool. Chloe watched me intently, mimicking every step as though she were an apprentice. Noah knocked over a stack of chairs, giggling, and I managed a brief smile, though my gut felt hollow. Elise toyed with the idea of homeschooling. Fire drills at the school were indefinitely postponed. Teachers were instructed to keep kids home. Parents who still sent them were warned to quarantine. Chloe hugged her stuffed owl, Owlbert, and asked, "Dad, will we ever go back to school?" Her voice cracked. I knelt, pulling her into my arms. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, "but we'll do our best to stay safe." She pulled back and nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. At 12, she was brave in ways I feared she didn't fully understand. I swept Noah into my arms, feeling his small weight against me. He smelled like shampoo and baby powder. He burrowed against my neck. "There's monsters outside," he whimpered. I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Daddy's here, buddy. I'll keep the monsters away." By midday, I'd barricaded our front door with a heavy steel bar we found in the garage and taped plastic sheeting over the gaps. Windows were reinforced with old plywood panels borrowed from an old shed. Our home felt more like a fortress, but each noisy hammer blow echoed with dread. Inside, Elise scrubbed surfaces with bleach and vinegar so vigorously I worried she might burn through the countertops. I took the afternoon to reinforce our perimeter. I'd drawn a crude map of our block, marking vantage points and choke points, where we might notice visitors, friendly or otherwise. Our backyard fence was old, slats missing in places. I fixed those. I checked the rainwater barrel for contamination. I strung old Christmas lights on the porch for visibility at night, though they flickered weakly. We set up a nightly rotation. Elise with Chloe on the main floor, I'd take the top half with Noah. Chloe's binoculars were strapped to her chest. She insisted on looking out, scanning for the first signs of trouble. She kept a notebook, charting observations. At 7:21 p.m. saw smoke on the horizon. At 8:02 p.m. heard sirens 2 streets away. She was younger than I was at my first job, but her resolve steadied me. Days bled into one another like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Phone signals flickered. sometimes a single bar, sometimes nothing. The news played snippets between static. Epsilon was now in every state. Death toll rising, curfews declared. At night, helicopters roared overhead, searching suburbs for outbreaks. One evening, I took a quick trip to the corner grocery store, barely a kilometer away. By the time I approached on foot, a line of desperate faces wrapped around the building, 5 people deep. Shelves were already nearly emptied. No bread, no milk, no eggs. I kept my distance, wearing an improvised cloth mask soaked in vinegar. A man near the front coughed into his elbow. I watched him carefully, weighing risk. I didn't see anyone else coughing, but his eyes were bloodshot. I kept my head down and slipped inside through an unlocked back door. A door I'd seen propped open earlier by someone desperate. Plastic crates lay haphazardly on the floor, crushed cans on the ground. I moved quickly, grabbing canned corn, beans, a bag of rice, powdered milk, and a few jars of pasta sauce. My fingers trembled as I tucked each can into my backpack. The fluorescent lights flickered as I made for the back exit. That's when I saw her. An old woman hunched over by the deli counter. She coughed harshly, drool at the corner of her mouth. She looked at me with pleading eyes as though begging. I wanted to help, to offer her what I had, but I knew I couldn't. If she had Epsilon, it could kill my family. So I looked away, crossing to the exit, and slipped out into the gathering dusk. By the time I returned home, shadows long on our street, I was skittish, every crunch of gravel sending my heart racing. I set the groceries on the porch and called softly, "Family, it's Dad." Elise opened the door, concern in those beautiful hazel eyes. Chloe peeked over her mother's shoulder, and Noah rushed out, arms flailing. "Daddy!" He hugged me, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. But our relief was short. Less than an hour later, Elise collapsed. A single convulsion, then a shallow breath. I caught her calling her name. Chloe screamed, and Noah began sobbing. I didn't dare let go of my wife. I dragged her to bed, laid her down gently. She opened her eyes, so dark, so frightened, and whispered, "Mark, I'm cold." I fetched blankets. I poured water on her wrists, checking for fever. High, 39.8 degrees Celsius. I held a damp cloth to her forehead. "I'm here," I said. I stroked her hair. "You're going to be okay." Deep inside, I knew she might not be. We isolated her in our bedroom. I wiped down the door handles, sealed the gap with tape. Chloe and Noah stayed behind me as I climbed on top of the roof, installed the solar panel harnesses for extra battery power. Neighbors were posting silhouettes behind drawn curtains. Everyone was afraid. By dawn, Elise lay still. Frost gathered on the window. Chloe knelt at her side, pressing Albert's nose to her mother's lips. "Mum," she whispered. The only answer was the quiet hum of power from our small generator. I watched them for a long moment, feeling the weight of my sword arm. I carried her outside the next day. She didn't move. The backyard had become our graveyard. I dug a shallow hole near the lemon tree. Noah didn't watch. Chloe stood at the fence, head bowed, tears streaming in silent lines. I laid Elise in the ground, tucking her shawl around her shoulders. I told her I loved her, but I'm not sure she heard. The world felt emptier then, echoing in the hollow of my chest. Our first casualty. A sacrifice none of us wanted, but all of us understood was inevitable. In the days that followed, I watched my daughter harden in ways I didn't expect. Chloe's tears dried up like rain on hot pavement. She took on tasks, cooking oatmeal for Noah, gathering wood, checking our improvised traps for rabbits. Noah, barely 6, tried his best. Quiet, eyes big as marbles, clutching Owlbert like a lifeline. I moved to reinforce the house. I tore down the fence and built a barrier of metal, sheeting, and timber boards. It took 3 days. I was dizzy from heat and muscle aches, but I could not stop. Each hammer blow drove home the message: I will not let this world take you. Chloe helped me carry scrap metal. She handed up nails, each one a small promise that we were still alive. At night, we'd sit around a kerosene lamp on the porch, speaking in whispers. Noah muttered little prayers. Please keep Mummy safe. Chloe drew in her notebook, sketches of huddled families, silhouettes against a burning sky. I didn't know whether to hug her or let her work through her grief in silence. I resumed raiding supply runs, knife-edged trips to the grocery near the old highway, where I scavenged whatever remained: canned tomatoes, flour, boiled sweets for the kids. Each trip felt like dancing on the edge of oblivion. I kept my rifle slung over my shoulder, eyes darting for the first sign of trouble. Zombies, rioters, the stray malcontent, every rusted car hood, every swirling ash cloud told me the fight for survival would never end. By mid-autumn, Epsilon's spread forced the army to set up checkpoints. I'd driven once to town, driving along roads lined with toppled streetlights, ash drifting like snow. The checkpoint was a convoy of rusted Humvees and ragtag soldiers. They barked at passers-by to show papers. I'd buried ours in a drawer to avoid scrutiny. When I saw them approaching, I yanked the key from the ignition and leapt from the truck, tossing my inhaler to Noah. Chloe scooped him up and sprinted towards the woods as I flung the driver's door open and fired a warning shot into the air. The soldier lowered his rifle, shouting to his comrades. I grabbed Chloe's hand and pulled us into the thick edge of trees. We ran until the hum of engines faded. That night, I realized the world had shifted into a new kind of danger, one where we weren't just fighting a virus, but a breakdown of trust and order. Winter's chill seeped into our bones. I built a lean-to of branches and tarps by a small spring we'd discovered when the river's edge retreated. The water was pure, reflecting moonlight like a scattered constellation. We boiled and filtered it, passing cups to Chloe and Noah. The children were growing. Chloe's face looked thin, her hair falling in tangled wisps. Noah's cheeks were hollow, but his spirit remained intact. He still told me jokes, still called me Super Dad. Each dawn felt like a gift we barely understood. My nights were spent listening for sounds: wood snapping, distant moans, the crackle of embers in a neighbor's home. I learned to spot the signs of infection in animals: a rabbit staggering in circles, a crow collapsing mid-flight. One morning, I cornered a rabbit near our trapline. Its eyes were glazed. I whispered a brief apology and ended its suffering. Chloe watched, stomach tightened. "That's how we know," she said, her voice brittle. I nodded. No more words could help her understand. We lost more to the virus. Mrs. Perry across the street, her coughing started as a tease, a little buzz in her throat. 2 nights later, her cries woke me. By morning, she was gone. I buried her on her lawn with a cloth sheet and a willow branch as a makeshift grave marker. I placed it at the foot of her fence so we'd remember that kindness was still needed, even when despair felt eternal. Then came the day we lost Jack Harris, a man who had helped me fire up a generator when ours died. I found him one morning, half buried beneath the fridge, collapsed in his kitchen doorway. No sign of struggle, just a single note pinned to his front door. "Stay away. This is ours. I took the note down, folding it into my pocket. Chloe watched from the window. I laid my hand on her shoulder. "We hold our ground," I whispered. "Remember?" One evening, after Elijah, the next door boy, disappeared and his parents followed soon after, Chloe and I journeyed back into the city ruins. Our goal, a pharmacy with a rumored stockpile of antibiotics and baby formula. I wrapped myself in an old jacket, loaded my backpack with canned goods, knives, rope, and my father's brass compass, an heirloom that had never led me astray. Chloe carried her sketchbook and a folding tent. Noah stayed at the lean-to clutching Owlbert and whispering prayers for me. We walked for hours, muting the dawn. Buildings hung like skeletons overhead, windows gaping like empty eye sockets. We picked our way through alleys strewn with debris. A shattered billboard rattled in the breeze. "Vote for tomorrow." The irony was not lost on me. The world of tomorrow was here, and it was a nightmare. At the pharmacy, glass doors were cracked, hinges rusted. Inside, shelves yawned empty. But in the back, I found a stash. A half handful of antibiotic vials, a few boxes of aspirin, and a single can of baby formula. I wrapped them in my coat. Chloe found a broken mirror and polished it clean with her sleeve, anything to lift her spirits. As we prepared to leave, a low moan answered us. We froze. Through the fog, a figure staggered, ravenous, skin mottled purple with the virus. Its eyes roamed like a predator's. Chloe pressed herself behind me. I stood in the doorway, rifle trembling. It advanced, each step a ragged gasp. I aimed for the head. The report cracked like thunder in the confined space. The creature jerked and slumped. I dropped to my knees afterward, chest heaving, forgetting the can of formula in my hand as guilt washed over me. Chloe nudged me. "Dad, it had a name once," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "I know," I said, voice hoarse. "And now it's gone." She slipped a hand into mine. "We have to keep going." There it was, her unspoken promise to push forward, even when hope seemed tiny. We made our way back. The sun was setting behind the ruined skyline, casting the city in blood-orange light. I turned to Chloe and said, "Noah will be waiting." She nodded, determination in her eyes. We arrived at midnight. Noah lay by the lean-to fire, speaking to his owl toy. His small face lit by embers, terrified and relieved. Elise, his mother, was gone, but I found her scarf above the spring. I pressed it to my face, tasting her faint lavender scent. I whispered to the dark, "I'm back." Inside the lean-to we huddled, sharing a single can of formula among the children. The night was cold, but we was warmer than I'd been in weeks because we had each other. Chloe's head rested on my shoulder. Noah clutched my hand. Hope was a flicker, but still a flicker. In the first pale light of dawn, I stepped outside. The sky had cleared to a brittle blue. The forest beyond glimmered with frost. Birds sang a tentative song, some curious, some frightened. I took a deep breath of the cold air, feeling it fill my lungs like promise. We would endure, we would rebuild. Because that was what we do. We stand, we fight, we hope. And somewhere out there, the world would come to its senses again. Trees would bloom, rivers would run clear, and children, my children, would grow into the sunlight of a new tomorrow. That was the last light I held onto. And I still hold it, even now as I speak to you, my voice shaky but resolute. Because hope is the only thing more contagious than any virus. And as long as I breathe, I will pass it on.